Like being yourself is really being able to just share exactly who you are, flaws and all, with the world and be okay with it. And this is the first time in my life that I've ever been okay with it. So, hi everyone, and welcome to All My Stories. I'm Nina Davalori. I'm a former Miss America filmmaker and activist, and on this channel, I love sharing all of my big sis advice. If you're new here, please subscribe, like, follow, do all the YouTube things so we can help build the community that I really want to build here. Today's video is a continuation of the last video. This is part 2 of my sober journey. So if you have not seen part 1, go back and watch that first because it's a helpful precursor to this. And if you've also not seen Pretty Addicted, that video is from my one-person show. Pretty Addicted goes into the rock bottom moment of my relationship with alcohol. So go back and watch all of those if you haven't. And also there's a lot of backstory in my one-person show. Pretty Naked is my one-person show. That's the title of it overall. And there are 7 chapters, and Pretty Sober is the last of these 7 chapters. So go back and watch all of them if you get a chance. I'm so proud of that show. You know, the impetus behind even writing it. I feel like impetus is such a Miss America word that I used to use. Let's just digest this. The whole reason why I even wrote, produced, directed, and just did the show was to share my sober journey and how important that is to me in life. I'm close to 3.5 years sober now, and so I'm on the other side of it, and I've been able to see all the wonderful things that have come into my life because of that journey, and I finally feel ready to be able to share that. So that's why I wrote the show. I also really wanted to sing. I am getting my master's at NYU in vocal performance. It's just one of my childhood dreams, and I don't think I would have been able to get there if I was not sober. Like, I wouldn't have, I know it, because so many more insecurities happen when I was drinking, for me at least, a lot piled up. The last video I left off about making the decision to get sober and what led me to that point. And so this video is about how I actually did it. I feel like that would have been really helpful to me. Like what happens day one when you wake up, like where you're feeling so hungover, like you are in probably the worst place in your life, at least I was, like rock bottom. And so like, what does that day one even look like? And for me, I remember I just started Googling meetings. Like I started looking for a meeting, and I remembered back in 2019 when I went to my first meeting, the person who had approached me had showed me that there was an app, and it's called Meeting Guide. And if you just look it up on the App Store, it's like a little chair emoji, and it has all the meetings that are in your area and nearby, and it's like worldwide too. So you can just type in your address, and that meeting guide was so helpful. They also put like if it's a virtual meeting or links. And so I started there because I knew the first thing I needed to do was get myself to a meeting. Like that is the first thing, because you need a lot of support on this journey. It is, I won't say impossible, but I could not have done it alone, and you don't have to do it alone. There are resources. And also, I wasn't able to go to my family. I couldn't even talk to my sister at this point because I was so ashamed about how I had behaved and like my actions that I didn't feel comfortable going to her. And I think the other thing too is that keeping in mind, you know, I was still in therapy twice a week and really trying to work on this issue. And, you know, the idea that my relationship with alcohol is my own, it's no one else's responsibility, it's no one else's burden to carry, it is mine and mine alone, and I have to choose how I'm going to deal with it, essentially. And so I didn't want to bring any of my family into it because I felt like that actually would have been more difficult to me. I didn't want to hear the, oh yeah, we were right. I just didn't want to hear anything negative that would even deter me or make like the rebel side of me want to be like, no, I'm not doing it, because that is definitely in me. And I also have like an all or nothing personality, which makes sense, honestly. What's probably what put me in this position. And so I will be like really intense about something. So once I made the decision to get sober, I was like, I'm gonna be the best sober person ever. Like, I'm gonna do this. And if you haven't watched Pretty Sober, just watch it. And so that was kind of the mentality that I had. So I got myself to a first meeting. you have to go to a couple to see which ones you like, to see like the people that you just vibe with. It's energy, it's a feeling. So like you just have to go to a few. The second app I used is called I Am Sober. And this one like tracks your entire progress of like how long you've been sober. There's like also what I like about this is that it kind of gives you like a reason. Like every day you check in and it lists the reason why. Like you write down your why of why are you doing this? Like why are you giving up X, Y, or Z? And why are you starting this journey? And I wrote this however many years ago, 3 years, 4 months, and 8 days ago. And, I wrote, I want to continue to flourish and reach my potential. I want to feel good about myself, to stay out of depression, anxiety, and paranoia, and to love myself, to be me without having to pretend to be anyone else. And that was my why. I also wrote down like little things, like I guess big things. I also wrote down I don't want to fight with my family. Don't want to lose my family. I want to embrace like my full potential, let go of my loneliness. But the biggest thing was to be me without having to pretend to be something that I'm not. And I think to some degree, most of my life I had been sort of pretending in some ways. Like, yes, there were parts of me that are very genuine and real that are still here today and still exist today. But, there was a lot that wasn't. So what's nice about this app is that there's also community in it, so you can write down your thoughts or talk with other people who are also going through this journey. So it's just another way of accountability. One thing that I also thought was really cool that I didn't even keep track of is that it says how much do you think your addiction is costing you? And I was like, oh, I don't know, I was like, maybe $20 a day. Like even going out in New York, right? You get drinks, one or two, like on average, I was like, all right, let's say like $20 a day. And it calculates your savings. So to date, since I've been sober, if I have saved $20 a day, say, it's probably more if I'm probably being honest, drinks are expensive. I've saved $24,520. So that's just a nice reminder of just kind of the whole scope of this is really taking over your life. It's just a nice check-in in addition to all the meetings. So I did the 90 meetings in 90 days. That is what people say is you really have to do 3 months every day, just go to a meeting. I think I did beyond that too. That first year I was in a meeting every day, if not every other day, past the 90 days. I was very consistent with it. The last thing I did, and this was the third thing that I felt really helped me, was I joined a specific ladies big book study. That's sort of the guidebook to AA, and there was a specific women's group that studied the book together and went through the book. Alcohol affects women differently, and so this was a group that felt like such a safe space to be able to discuss specifically issues that we as women deal with alcohol and drinking and what it does to our bodies. And I thought that was super helpful. That was actually one of my favorite studies that I did. And one of the questions, when you go through the initial questionnaire, I felt like I was going back to school because I saved all my things from this. But one of the questions that I remember stopping at for my homework that we had to do was question number 13. And it said, am I leading a double life? And I was like, yes. What are your biggest fears and secrets? And I was just never being enough. That's one of my biggest fears. And on this journey, you peel back so many layers of the person that you are and why you do the things you do, and you have to get to the core of who you are, to the point where you can't pretend anymore. You can't fake it. You just get stripped down, and then after a certain point you realize you're kind of free. After a few years, it is actually one of the most freeing things, because this is a place where it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you've been, what successes, accolades, anything. It does not matter. All that matters is you as just a human being, and you are enough. And that concept was such a new and foreign concept to me, when you don't have conversations around what you do, or it's really about who you are. And that shifted everything for me, because I think a lot of the conversations is so much about what we do. It's you introduce yourself, hi, I'm Nina and I do this, this, and this. And when we meet people, it's the first thing we ask. We tend to sometimes think that those are our defining characteristics, and being able to actually think like, wait, like what I do doesn't define who I am. Like there's so much more to me than just that. And that was like the first time I had really started digging into that whole concept, which might be obvious to everyone, but like I wasn't able to see it until I was in my 30s. And started this journey. I had so much emphasis on what I was doing, and I felt like I had to keep achieving and keep doing, and nothing ever felt like enough. And that was one of my biggest fears. And so to start that process, and then I started really questioning, well, what is this all for? And, like you start questioning like life and purpose, and going through that entire journey. And that first year of sobriety is really so much of that internal work. And like, yes, you're focusing on just not drinking. That's like a day to day, every day. You're taking one day at a time. Biggest thing, like you have to take one day at a time. You cannot think of it from the rest of my life, because if I thought about it that way, it was like, well, what about my friend's wedding? What about their bachelorette? What about this? And that was coming up. Like I got sober in March, and then my very first bachelorette was in May of that year. We went to the Hamptons, and that was the first time I was going to be in an environment like that I wasn't drinking. And then my first wedding was in June of that year. And so like a lot of these things were coming up organically and naturally in life, and learning how to deal with them, especially in those first early months. You need your community, you need your home group, you need a sponsor. Like find those things and set yourself up, because I mentioned this in my last video, but I had looked for rehab centers and treatments, and rehab is expensive. Like it is really expensive. And it honestly would have been like the perfect time for me to go, because it was COVID, but I couldn't do that. I knew I had to stay in New York, and I knew I had to find an alternative way. And I knew that I had to like put together the schedule for myself. So I had like a full-on calendar of like just meetings of like, what am I doing? And if I wasn't going to a meeting, it was a lot of like continuing Oprah and Glennon. And I started listening to like Jay Shetty's podcast. And there have been a couple people that he's had on that have talked about addiction. And then also listening to different podcasts of people who have shared their own addiction story was so helpful. Like that was the thing I found the most helpful, was to hear people's stories before, during, and after. And that's one of the reasons why I'm even doing this, is because like I know how helpful it was to me to like see that person and hear what they have discovered about themselves, or where is the light at the end of the tunnel. Because in the early phases you're just so in it, and like that first year is the hardest year of my life. It was, and probably will be, one of the hardest years of my life. Because you're just dealing with so much, and like learning new ways of thinking and living, and just being who you are and finding that. And the stories I would hear others tell really gave me hope to hold on to, and to see what they've done, and for them to also come out and share it. I was really grateful for and inspired, because there's actually a lot of sober people in this world when you start looking for it. And a lot of the people I respect and admire are people who are sober. And that was really helpful, because when I looked to them, I was like, oh, they're able to achieve these things and yet have the same problem I'm struggling with, or they have made a choice that I feel has been really hard. And I think those were like the big things that really helped me during that first year. As I moved into that journey, I would say I think in September of 2021 was when I got an email asking if I would give a TED Talk. And I've gotten this email before. This wasn't my first time being asked to do a TED Talk, I'm not gonna lie. But it was the first time I felt ready to do the TED Talk, like truly. And I knew I wasn't about to share like my addiction journey, because I was just so in it at that point. Like it had only been like March, April, May, June, July, August, 6 months at that point. And so that it was definitely too soon, but it gave me something to really think about, because that's when I also started unraveling really this entire beauty standards journey, because I had placed such an emphasis on Miss America and looking a certain way and being a certain way and having to maintain this perfect image. Otherwise I wasn't valuable. Otherwise I wasn't enough if I didn't look that way, or if I didn't behave in certain ways, or have meet the expectations that other people were setting for me, which is ridiculous, like ridiculous. But that's how I thought. What I really wanted to talk about was really the undoing of why did I care so much about beauty? And also tying in the fact of I know how I felt when I was on social media looking at all of these images of beautiful, stunning people living their happy lives, and how much that affected me and made me feel depressed and anxious and like I wasn't either doing enough or didn't look like a certain way or wasn't maintaining a certain image, and felt like that was the only value. And I know how much that hurt me, and I'm certain that that contributed to the depression that I was going through and through all the negative self-talk that I was having. And so that was what really led to my TED Talk. I gave my TED Talk, The Cost of Beauty from a Miss America, and that was in April of 2022. So I'd had 1 year sobriety under my belt. I wanted to acknowledge my 1 year because I was really, really proud of being able to get past that, get to the 1 year. First of all, it's a really big deal. And I wanted to find a way to also be able to really share that without making it about that. I felt like the bigger, broader message needed to be beauty standards, and that was so intentional and core to who I was and the journey that I was on and discovering. But obviously, being sober was a part of that. And so I do say in the talk that when I talk about what beauty has cost me, it's cost me years of my mental health, a lifetime of an eating disorder, anxiety, depression, and addiction. And I do say that in the talk because I did want to acknowledge that this is a part of that. And it's not something I said lightly, but I do think that those insecurities and the social media and the not being enough and all of it combined did lead to the drinking, and that felt like a coping mechanism, which obviously was not the best way to handle it. And so that was kind of really the first year of sobriety, and being able to get to that TED Talk to kind of have an anchor of something that I was working towards felt really good. And that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't committed, if I didn't take the initiative, if I wasn't constantly working on this every single step of the way. I did tell my family in April of 2021 that year. So once I had 1 month of sobriety, I did tell my mom and my sister, and that's a whole separate story. If you really want to know the story, I will consider sharing the story, because I can really, really understand how difficult it is, especially coming from a South Asian family. And we've all achieved a lot. We're all told that we have to achieve a lot. Our value is based on achieving a lot oftentimes. Love is sometimes conditional on that achievement. And I know so many stories of how difficult that in itself is. And having to admit this to your family is one of the hardest things, because it's interesting, because I can go into a room and share this, or I feel more comfortable even speaking on YouTube or on camera and sharing this, but the people closest to you are often the ones that you have the most difficult time sharing your deepest, darkest thoughts and secrets with, when it should be the other way around. At least that's what has proven to me on my own journey. And I've taken steps to make it the other way around, to want to be open and have more hard conversations, because we just didn't have hard conversations in my family or at home. And I was always the one pushing them, and I'm still always the one continuing to do it. And it's like, oh, we have to do this again. And I'm like, yes, we need to sit down and have a whole conversation about this and unpack all of it. And I've always been that way, so it's no surprises. But yeah, let me know if you want that video, and let me know what questions you have. There's so many things I've learned through this journey, but I think it's really just applies to life advice in general, and setting boundaries, and what your purpose is, and searching for that, and manifestation, and rediscovering your childhood dreams. Like, all of it is connected, but in different categories and ways. So yeah, let me know what you want to see. I hope this was helpful for you in terms of the actual how, and some certain tools and resources that I used that I found really helpful to me. If you know someone who is struggling with this and might benefit from this video, please send this to them. I tried to put in like very tangible things that you can kind of do that day one moment, and just how to navigate all of the thoughts in your head. And yeah, if you liked this video, if you want to know more about life stuff and lifing, ask me some questions in the comments. Please subscribe, do all the YouTube things, because it really does help build the community that I hope that I can thoughtfully and we can thoughtfully build here. So, yeah, direct the conversation. Let me know where you want this to go, because I don't want to just plan to do these videos. I want this to be like a two-way street. So, the more questions you ask, the better. That will direct where we want to go, where we want this conversation to go, because I finally feel relieved, honestly. Like, being yourself is really being able to just share exactly who you are, flaws and all, with the world and be okay with it. And this is the first time in my life that I've ever been okay with it. So for whoever's watching, thank you for just watching and giving me that freedom. It is a gift. And I just appreciate all of you. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for watching. I will see you next time.